Constitution sets out your rights and advises you should stop the car in a safe place as quickly as possible. Turn off the car, turn on the interior light, open the window partway, and place your hands on the wheel. Upon request, show police your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Both drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent. If you're a passenger, you can ask if you are free to leave. If yes, silently leave. All right, with all of that said, are you comfortable as parents, as people of color, educated civil libertarians, advising your family and friends to follow these tips?
I am, and I can say we're a situation where it did work out, but it was also probably one of the most heart-wrenching things I witnessed as a mom over the phone. So, fall of 22, my son attended Tuskegee University. He was coming home from work late one night, made a turn. You know, you're supposed to turn into your right lane. He turned into the left lane. The cops pulled him over. He made sure he went to a lighted area. Another cop showed up on the scene. They asked my son, can we search your car? My son says no. Unbeknownst to me, my son locked his car doors when he got out of his car. Mm-hmm. Immediately when he says no, the other cop brings out a dog to sniff around his car. Mm-hmm. So you see all these things that he did right that fortunately worked out in his system, but they can't, like, we're on a phone call with his uncle and my dad for like a half an hour with them grilling my son, saying, we need to ask you some questions, but you have the right not to answer them. We're not putting you under arrest, but we do want to sit you in the back of our car. Mm-hmm. And so we went through this for about 40 minutes before the sheriff finally came back on the phone and said, we don't understand what the problem is, but we were able to find his registration. So he's okay, he's good to go.
I would have had a heart attack, my God.
But I mean, it was literally the scariest moment as a parent. But you look at all those things he did right. He rolled down the window. He told him, no, you can't search my car. But yet then you take a dog to go sniff around his car. You get him out of the car by telling him you need to look at his back license plate. So you see all these things because the person in power that could have easily gone wrong for that. So I'm lucky here as a parent saying I still have my son. But you see that thing, yes, he defended himself, yes, he did that, it worked out for him, but at the same time, you see all the things that could have gone wrong in terms of what the cops also did.
You know what I'm saying? I'll try not to get boiled down in what should be, I know my rights, but this is a person I'm talking to. And I try to, keep my disposition that way. You know what I'm saying?
That's putting a burden on the citizen.
Yes, it is.
Which is unfair, as well as it's shifting a constitutional burden to uphold the law
to me,
to you, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a right to cuss the police out. Right. They're the ones who should be trained and the like to de-escalate, right? They're the ones who shouldn't assume criminality. And yet we see, in the instance of your son, the ways in which they can manipulate their power and walk up to that line of the law, right? Step out of the car, there's something wrong, we can't really see your light. I mean, we know in so many instances, a cop steps on your foot, you push him back, or suddenly you're assaulting an officer, right? I mean, there's so many different ways, and the police understand this.
Right.
So it's not just they're entering into these situations from a position of naivete. They understand their power, and they understand the ways in which the law and the courts have backed them over us. And so it's a challenge because we do have to consider them as human beings and the ways in which any human being would react in a stressful situation. These are stressful situations. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily right.
Correct.
Right? And that's an important distinction.
So let me just build off of that and have you, Professor Jeffries, talk about any patterns or historical construct that might help somebody to know when they're encountering a hostile law enforcement sort of environment.
I think the safe approach is to assume hostile intent and to proceed from there. That is unfortunate because you should presume innocence, but reality says something different. And so I think that you should assume the worst, be grateful for the best, and be prepared for anything in between.
What do you think, our kids should know about surviving the stop? Because we know you want to go in looking sharp, but What do they need to know about handling the encounter, especially when they feel like their rights might have been violated?
My thing is know your rights, de-escalate, kind of acquiesce, do what they ask you to do. Keep your hands on especially Malachi, because he's huge. I'm like, keep your hands on that wheel, right? Because they could look at him and think he's like 25 and he's not, he's 16. So my thing is always letting them know, and I can handle this later.
Everything is in the moment, right? So you could be anywhere, anytime, and be violated. So there are steps afterwards. You don't have to be the single warrior. You don't have to be alone. And I think that's why it's important to have this conversation.
We're thinking about and having this conversation about the moment that there is this police encounter and that stop. And what we're really saying is this can be a life or death situation, and we understand that. And we have to think about it almost in those terms. But the calculation that so many people are making isn't so much about life and death. It's life and death in a different way. It's life and death of, man, if I lose this job, I can't make rent, I got to get out of this situation somehow, some way. So if that means I may have some weed in the car, but look, if you're asking to search it, go ahead, right? I mean, you see these things because they're trying to just get out of the situation in the moment. Because it's not so much about their life and death in the moment, but it's their lives.
That's
Correct.
And so how do we, and I don't have a good answer for this, right? I mean, I think it can turn tragic, and it turns tragic too often, that it's critical that we know that we know our rights, but we also have to recognize the various privileges that we do have.
That's true.
That we can say, look, just, consent to whatever, I'll fight it later. Not everybody has that.
We're going to jump in and talk about the adultification of our young people. You worked recently with young people as an educator. Would you like to start?
Well, when children are in school, then people assume they're a certain age. So if you go into a high school, you assume everybody's a certain age. But you take kids out of context, and all of a sudden they look older. We think they're adults. We treat 12-year-olds like they're grown up. And they still have the mind of a 13-year-old.
Because they are.
14, because they are, right, exactly. That's what I was going to say, just like all of us. And not only are they put in situations where they're looked at as an adult and talked to like an adult, but the person who's talking to them like that assumes they're an adult, and when they respond as a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old, then it's seen as aggressive.
And you talked about, restraint. Well, I can see you use restraint on, white people, but I don't see you use restraint on black people. I've also seen it the same way with children. So they'll have a person that's not brown or black that will respond in a way that a child will respond, and they can say, well, that person is acting like a child. However, they don't have the same consistency and perspective when it's a black or brown child that's responding that way. So while they know that, they pick and choose also when they choose to have that perspective.
Race isn't real, biologically meaningless. We know that racism is real. And one of the ways in which racism manifests itself in the American context is the adultification of African American youth. And we know this. Psychologists have run these tests that literally, when we look, and African Americans will do the same thing, right? I mean, this is just projected onto black youth.
Absolutely.
That we will add years to their lives.
Yes, we do.
We will add more years to black males, but we will add years to black females as well, to young black girls. So until we get to the moment where, in this instance, talking about police, when police can encounter a black youth and they can appropriately age that child, and they can see that child not as an 18-year-old danger, but perhaps as their 12-year-old niece or nephew, then we know we're in a different situation than we are right now. But we're not there yet.
Are we close?
No. I mean, if we look at the ways in which black youth continually are being criminalized, even at the youngest ages. I mean, the Justice Department did this report on the disproportionate detentions and suspensions of African-American preschoolers.
Preschoolers, yep.
Right?
Yeah,
because they're acting above their age. They're doing things, so this is so deeply rooted that unless and until we begin to have real conversations about that, then we won't be able to change the behavior. We also can't separate this from the reality of a society that was predicated on not allowing black children to be children.
To even grow up.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
they literally
absolutely.
were supposed to be working.
Working, absolutely.
And have a history of that. 250 years of enslavement, 150 years, 100 years of Jim
absolutely.
Crow, of children, black children being forced to work.
Absolutely.
Whether as black women, black girls in fields and in homes, black boys. And so we can't suddenly then say or pretend as though, centuries of that can just, in the blink of an eye, dissipate. No, we're living with the consequences of that history.
And I think we have to correct educators. Like if I'm in a school, when I was a school social worker, and they would say things like, if I had a black girl about to get suspended and she had to come do mediation, they'll say, well, she was acting grown. I'm like, nope. She's not, nope, she's 12. She's 12 years old. She's not acting grown. She's 12, right? Like reminding educators about the language that we use to adultify our kids, because this is not, this is about the talk, but that sets black girls up for being sexually assaulted, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so understanding that that language, right, puts them in, at harm's way.
And we've even made laws to make it happen, right? You can be tried as an adult.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
When you are not an adult.
Right.
And who gets tried as adults, right?
Black and brown babies.
Right, exactly.